Hey, everybody, and welcome to Beefmaster Banner. We are your host, Josh Morrison and Jared Strickland. What's going on, Jared?
Oh, just having had a good break. Enjoyed Christmas and New Year's, and probably gained about 20 pounds going to all the family outings and gatherings. So probably gonna have to get on a New Year's resolution and exercise plan, I guess.
yeah, that break, I think I gained the same. The break was it was a good break, but I'm glad we're back. Um, it's
Oh,
always fun to get back and get going.
well, yeah, I'm excited about the new year and the prospects we got in the cattle business, and looking forward to keep moving forward with the banner and really, getting into the details on some stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of moving forward with it, this year Jared and I decided to try to have some show sponsors and be able to take all that money that we get and move the podcast forward, hopefully help the breed, and be able to market in bigger places, to where we may not have before. And you know we had a really good, we put it out on Facebook and had a really good response. And our very first two show sponsors were Lissy's Beefmasters. They're in Texas, and Rancho Carrillo Beefmasters in Virginia. It means a whole lot that they're willing to spend their money for us to advertise for them, and be able to again share their names and help us get the podcast going.
Yes, we definitely appreciate the response we've got so far on that.
And before we get into it, if anybody else wants to um, be a show sponsor, please message us on the Beefmaster Banner Facebook page. We'll be able to get you everything you need. But be on the lookout for Lissy Beefmaster. They have multiple sales a year. They have online genetics, frozen genetic sales, and a bull sale now, and they have their regular sale. I still think it's bi-yearly. Um, Rancho Carrillo, same way. They've be looking out for their stuff. I know him, and he's really building a good program over there. So, but getting into our show tonight, we've got Mr. David Holloway with Nextgen Cattle Company. How you doing, David?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. How was your Christmas?
Good. Had a really good Christmas, quiet, just home with family, and so just a nice break. Always,
Abs-
always thankful to have it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now it's kind of funny. Jared made mention. We are in three different time zones, which just is amazing to me. That there again, it goes back to the podcast that we can have three different time zones, and be able to do this thing. So that's pretty cool. Um, before um, Before we get into, I guess, the meat of the conversation tonight, well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you came from, education. Tell us what you do in Next Gen for them. Just give us an overall background, if you will.
Okay. Well, first, to both you guys, Josh and Jared, thanks for having me on. Hope this is beneficial and helpful to everybody. And so we'll go wherever y'all need to go. Question wise, I don't have a lot of answers, but I know people that can find them that are a lot smarter than me, so we can work through that as well. But um, anyway, my background. Here's what's relevant about my background, and your, your listeners probably are going to wonder why you have me on. What's relevant about that is I got kicked off the FFA livestock judging team in high school because I was so bad at it. I mean, really bad, embarrassingly bad. But I grew up in agriculture. I wanted to stay involved in ag, so that's why I went the markets route because I knew the production side just wasn't my thing. Um, my interest in markets started as a kid back in the 1970s. We listened to the ag market reports on the radio, like everybody else. We read the market bulletin that was published by the Georgia Department of Ag. That's still published, by the way. Every Sunday after church, my grandpa Holloway would drive to town and buy a copy of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It was the thick one, the weekly, and we'd read the market section. It was the first place I ever saw financial market quotes and futures markets quotes for all the ag markets. With that, I kind of began to realize there was a whole world outside of cherry log that somehow affected us every day and what we did and our livelihood and the livelihood of our neighbors. Um, from that, I saw how hard my family and all the other producers that I knew, how hard they worked, only to sell their hard earned and produced crops or livestock when everybody else did, which meant they sold the lowest corn prices and cattle prices of the year. My family is also in the timber business. I saw the same thing there. Timber owners spent decades growing a crop, and in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of times the market was down, and they sold then, and so I didn't know what it all meant, but there was something in the back of my brain then that made me wonder if there wasn't really kind of a better way to do that, and that's really where why my interest in markets was triggered, is because I was very bad at the livestock side, and then that's really kind of where my interest started, was through kind of watching how everybody participated in the markets, and just thinking, well, maybe there was a better way. Again, I was just a kid. I didn't really understand what there was, but that's where the spark kind of started. And I think as I was thinking about this, there was one point that I think we should talk about here. I mean, you mentioned, Josh, 3 different time zones and doing a podcast and whatnot. I mean, it's a great segue into something else I thought about. You got to remember, as a geezer, I'm an eyewitness to the world without internet, without real-time price quotes and trading on your phone. You can trade stocks, you can trade commodities, you can do that from, your phone anywhere you got service. Back then, you had to work hard to find market information, and it was a little bit outdated when you got it. And now you've come to a point where it's almost like the market chases you around. Market information, market quotes, you can't get away from it hardly anymore. So that's a big change in producer information, producer knowledge. And part of the challenge then is how do you sift through that and find valuable and useful information, and then what do you do with it? And I think that the second part of that point is it's important because it's a big change in the markets. I started, in the business, professionally in 1988, and today global financial markets react instantly to all kinds of inputs. They create little reactions from ripples to huge tidal waves across all markets, and that includes all the ag markets. It's something that's hugely important that we'll talk more about later, I'm sure. But the rate of change is increasing at an increasing rate, and being able to adapt is key to survival. And that's nowhere more important than in the markets, I think. So I don't know, I'm probably rambling and getting off track a little bit, but that's a little bit, I think, some of the things that are relevant about my background. You ask what I do for Nextgen, excuse me. So I lead the risk management efforts there. Obviously, we have a lot of talented folks that do a lot of different things. I get a lot of input on a daily basis from our guys and our contacts, but really kind of what we try to do on a day-to-day basis from the standpoint of managing largely the risk on our cattle in the feed yard and our corn position. So that's a big part of it, but also, I try to look around the corner and see big picture wise what's coming. How do we as a company position ourselves, to take advantage of those things, and then also trying to be a resource for our customers. How do we, help our customers and other producers, take advantage of the same opportunities that we see coming along.
That's a interesting background. I enjoyed your story of how you got into marketing. That's pretty cool. Being interested in it, find something you're good at. It's what I've always been told. And listening to your, you send out emails and stuff like that, and you're definitely respected in the industry, and that's why we're so excited having you on. And I guess we're kind of in a unique position having you on at the time we do. We're kind of wanting to look back at 22 and look forward into 23, and I guess starting off, we kind of wanted to look back in 22 and it was an awful turbulent year. Kind of started out on a high note in a way, and I thought in the cattle market, and it ended up kind of changing different ways. I was buying open heifers at the end of 21, thinking that the herd expansion was about to get started, and here comes a drought. So shows you how wrong I was, but that's part of it. But anyway, I guess kind of moving forward, do you care to just kind of look back at the 22 market, and that way we can kind of set us up going forward, seeing how we can go into 23?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. I thought last year was going to be the year. I think a lot of people did too, and Mother Nature threw us all a curveball. Jared, for sure. I jotted down some quick notes here, and we'll just run through these real quick, and then we can go back and look at, talk about these things in more broadly. But so from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, fat cattle market was averaged $1.44. That's up $18 a hundred, or 13% year over year. That's the second highest ever, behind 2015. The feeder cattle market, if you use the CME feeder index, was up 10%. It averaged 176 versus 162 the year before. It was the highest since 2016. Cull cows averaged 159 on a dressed basis. That was up 12%. Cattle slaughter up 2%, 33.7 million head. That's a decade high. Beef production was up 2%, 28.5 billion pounds. That was an all-time record high beef production we got to remember, on a real small herd. Corn market for the calendar year was up $1.04 a bushel, or 18%. Hay prices, all-time record high, up 25% year over year, or $27 a ton. And diesel prices up 26%, or 92 cents a gallon. So, some of those are good, some of those are bad, but that's kind of a high-level overview of things, on the revenue side and on the cost side. Obviously, things that are input into production went up. From an overall perspective, though, I think you hit the nail right on the head. The drought was one of the key market factors last year. It extended the herd liquidation. It had been going on for a couple of years. That meant more supply now, and later we've just, we're just digging the hole deeper, is what it boils down to. So another thing from last year on the beef demand side, it was strong all year. I think that was one of the things coming into the year that, was a question, but as it turned out, we had probably record strong beef demand. There wasn't any stimulus, to kind of boost the demand like we had the year before, but it just kept growing. Demand for quality grade was exceptionally strong. Prime and choice premiums were record large on big supply. We should talk about that a little bit later. I don't think anybody saw that coming. On the corn market basis, just took off, particularly in a lot of cattle feeding areas. Flat price was also higher, as we briefly touched on earlier. I think another thing that was a big factor, and is probably going to be a factor again this year, is, a year ago, markets didn't see Ukraine coming. The situation there, the world gets a third of its wheat and a fifth of its corn from that Black Sea region. That was a big impact across the board last year. Still, yet to see the end of that. Corn demand from China was really strong the previous year or so in the US. That fell pretty hard last year. Of course, obviously the energy, the financial markets, stocks fell, interest rates rose, inflation wasn't transitory like we'd been told so many times. And then of course, all the input costs, as we briefly touched on, diesel, fertilizer, labor, everything else was higher last year. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on the recap of 2022. Does that answer the question, Jared?
Oh yes, yeah. We just kind of gives us a base to look back at, and when we look forward, because getting the market expert on here, we're going to ask you what 23's, what kind of prices we're going to have.
We're going to be there in just a little while. What's
Well,
interesting?
I'm sure interested in what the expert has to say. I don't think I'm an expert, but you got me on tonight anyway. So when you get the expert on, I'll make sure I listen.
There you go. Yeah, you are the expert, whether you want to admit it or not. You are the expert. What's interesting to me though is, the cattle market. It's always funny. Everything is directly affected, in all aspects of business. But in the cattle market, it doesn't matter what it is. It seems like everything affects cow pricing. Who would have ever thought, just a normal guy, war in Ukraine, probably wouldn't have thought that would have affected it a lot, but it really does. I mean, everything, gas prices, commodity prices, what's going on overseas, it all directly affects the cattle market.
Yeah, fertilizer prices. I mean, everybody, particularly in the lower southeast quadrant of the U.S., probably fertilizes every year or two pastures. There's a lot of fertilizer that comes out of that Black Sea region, and everybody knows what happened to fertilizer prices last year. So, direct impacts, exactly to your point, Josh.
It's just interesting how, you wouldn't, and I guess that's what I was getting at, is you wouldn't think in the cattle market things would be so volatile towards cattle pricing. That's the one thing in the world that, to me, everything directly affects it.
Yeah, for sure.
And kind of going back to the point you made, David, earlier, used to information was a little bit harder to find. Now everything's kind of at our fingertips. Just even in my, say last 10 years of watching cattle markets a little closer, the futures board it's a lot more volatile in the last few years than I remember ever seeing. You have those limit ups, limit downs, which is kind of slowed down some a little bit like the last, 6 months or so. But I remember back in 2020, that thing would be down, down, up, down, limit up, down, back and forth, and makes it hard to make a decision sometimes when it's just whipsawing like that.
Yeah, it sure does, Jared. And again, that's the whole, all the financial markets have become more connected than they've ever been. That does create opportunities. A lot of people complain about that, but I look at that and I say, one, we have to adapt to that because we know the market's changing. But that also creates opportunities. When you get the markets at one extreme or the other, even if it's fat cattle prices and you aren't feeding cattle, you've got that pulls up the feeder cattle board, and that gives you a chance to sell feeder cattle probably at a higher level, because even if you're not trading futures, the guy on the other side of the trade from you may be, or at least he's looking at that. I mean, we look at that. Every other cattle feeder is looking at the feeder board and the fat cattle board and the corn futures and all those things as they make those decisions. And so it does create a lot of volatility, and it makes, I think, having a marketing plan, at least somewhat sketched out, and having some targets and saying, hey, if we get here, and then having some discipline to do that. The hardest thing is when you say, okay, if the calf market gets to this level, I'm gonna sell them, or if the corn market or even hay gets to this price, I'm gonna buy it. and it goes down, and you know, it's human nature. You want to you get a little bit more. You want to let the market get cheaper on the inputs and higher on the revenue side. But you know, that's where the discipline comes in because of the volatility, and you got to have a game plan and stick with it.
I definitely agree with that for sure.
Yeah, that was and I think when we get to the to the part of looking forward to this year and going forward, which will be in our next episode, but it's gonna get even more important to figure out what your costs are, what your input costs are, and really make sure that you're making these smart decisions. But we are completely out of time for this episode. We're going to have David on again in our next episode, and we're going to talk about what he what he thinks may happen this year, moving forward, and we're going to talk markets and international and commodities again. David, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. It truly means a lot to Jared, and I know I tell a lot of people this, but it really does that you guys will take the time out of your evenings to come on with us and talk with us about stuff.
Well, more than happy to do it. Hope it's helpful. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. But we will again talk to David on the next episode, and we'll see you then. Well, we want to thank everybody for listening to the Beefmaster Banner podcast. Please know that we are on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and we are on YouTube. Just search Beefmaster Banner. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We love hearing from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.